My name is Emily Warren, and I am 22 years old. On the day I should have felt unstoppable, standing in the stadium of the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, wrapped in the deep blue gown of my graduation, I felt nothing but a hollow ache. The roar of families cheering for their children was deafening. The stands glittered with banners, roses, and flashes from cameras. But where 3 seats should have been filled with the faces of my parents and my sister, there was only emptiness staring back at me like a cruel reminder. When the announcer called my name, Emily Warren, Bachelor of Arts in Psychology, I walked across the stage, clutching my diploma with trembling hands. Strangers applauded, but not a single voice familiar to me cried out with pride. Not one pair of arms reached for me. I walked back down, forcing my legs to move, my smile twisted into something I barely recognized, my heart cracking under the weight of a silence that felt louder than the crowd itself. That morning, I had done my makeup carefully, feeling excitement I rarely allowed myself. But just before leaving, my phone buzzed with a message that sliced me open. Please understand, Olivia had a panic attack. We have to stay home and calm her down. That was all my mother wrote. No apology, no encouragement. Just that blunt sentence. Olivia, my older sister, the golden daughter of the family, once again pulled them away from my life. I stared at the screen, waiting for another line. Something that said, "We're proud of you. We'll come later." But nothing came. And in that silence, the truth I had buried for years roared to the surface. In my family, I had never been the priority. As the ceremony ended, I slipped away while laughter and applause still filled the air. The sun burned down. Decorations fluttered in the wind, yet I felt pulled into an empty void. 4 years of struggle, sleepless nights, exams that drained me. This was supposed to be the day that marked it all. Instead, it was just another scar carved into a heart already covered in wounds. Every moment of my childhood came rushing back. Meals where my father told me to leave the last piece of chicken for Olivia. Trips that were always adjusted to suit her wishes. Birthdays of hers celebrated like royal affairs, while mine passed with small cakes and rushed candles. I remembered the year I won a state scholarship, a near impossible achievement, only to have my parents shrug it off with a distracted, "You've always been smart." That same night, they clinked glasses and celebrated Olivia's Instagram photo reaching 3,000 likes. It became a pattern, a cruel refrain. "You're strong, Emily. You don't need much." That so-called praise was nothing more than an excuse to ignore me. They believed resilience was my armor, but it became the chain that bound me to silence. I gave up pieces of cake. I gave up vacations I dreamed of. I gave up recognition I deserved, all so she could shine. And I told myself it was fine, that someday they would see me. But standing in that stadium alone, I realized that day would never come. That night, I went home with my diploma clutched in my hand, my apartment suffocating in its silence. My phone lit up with 2 more messages. The first from my mother. "Sorry, honey. Olivia had a breakdown after fighting with her boyfriend. You understand." The second from my father. "We'll celebrate another day." 2 sentences, cold and detached. No congratulations, no pride. I collapsed on my bed, shaking, tears spilling until my chest hurt. I thought of all the sacrifices I had made, the awards I earned, the nights I worked extra shifts to pay my own tuition, all of it brushed aside, erased by Olivia's latest tantrum. The next morning, rage and despair boiling inside me, I drove back to my parents' house in Detroit. I walked into the living room, where they sat with Olivia lounging in silk pajamas like nothing had happened. My voice trembled as I said, "College graduation only happens once. You skipped mine because she was crying." My father frowned. My mother told me I was being selfish. And Olivia, with her practiced fragility, spoke as if her pain was more important than my milestone. My laugh came bitter, sharp, strong, independent. "That's not praise. That's the excuse you've used to ignore me for 22 years. The words tore from me, raw and shaking. But the silence that followed proved what I already knew. They had no answer. And then the front door opened. My grandfather, Henry Warren, walked in, tall, steady, once a respected lawyer. His gaze carried the weight of truth. He looked at me, tear-streaked, then at them, uneasy and pale. "What's going on here?" he asked. My voice broke as I told him everything. Every forgotten birthday, every sacrifice, every moment of neglect. For the first time, the truth poured out of me like a flood. My grandfather listened, his face grave, and then he turned to them. "Is this true?" My mother's excuses fell flat. My father stayed silent. And then my grandfather's voice thundered, steady and final. "For 5 years I've been paying your mortgage, keeping your business alive, believing you were raising these girls fairly. Today, I see that trust was betrayed. From this day forward, I cut off my support. Take care of yourselves." The room collapsed into shock. My parents sat frozen, Olivia pale and speechless. And for the first time, I felt the weight lift, as though someone had finally stepped into the shadows with me. My grandfather turned to me, his eyes soft, his voice steady. "Emily, come live with me. You don't need to endure this anymore." Tears streamed down my face as I whispered, "Yes, Grandpa, I want to, upstairs." I pulled out the old suitcase that had been sitting in the corner of my room since high school. My hands shook as I folded clothes into it. Each item weighted with memories of silence, neglect, and swallowed tears. The pale blue walls that once held my childhood dreams now felt like prison bars. My desk, worn from nights of studying alone, seemed to whisper back every time I told myself to be patient, that one day my parents would see me, but they never had. They never would. As I zipped the suitcase shut, the sharp sound cut through the air like a declaration. I was done being invisible. Downstairs, my parents' voices rose in panic. They weren't begging me to stay. They were clinging to my grandfather, desperate to keep the financial support that had sustained their lives. My father's voice cracked with urgency. "Dad, if you take her away, how are we supposed to survive? The business is failing. The house is still under a loan." My mother's tone was soft but frantic. "We know we've been unfair, but it's not as bad as she makes it sound. Please, don't cut us off." Their words pierced me. Not because they wanted to keep me, but because they didn't. They feared losing the money, not their daughter. That truth burned like acid in my chest. I came down the stairs slowly, suitcase in hand, my steps echoing through the silence. My grandfather stood tall, his presence steady as a wall of protection I had never known. My parents rushed toward him again, tears brimming in their eyes. "Dad, if Emily leaves, the neighbors will talk. They'll say we failed to raise her. Please, think of the family's reputation." I let out a bitter laugh that startled even me. Even now, appearances mattered more than I did. I rolled my suitcase to my grandfather's side, lifted my chin, and met their eyes for the first time without fear. "Let's go, Emily," my grandfather said firmly, placing his hand on my shoulder. His voice carried no hesitation, only the authority of someone who had seen the truth. We walked out together, their voices following us, not filled with love, but with desperate pleas for money. I didn't look back. The door slammed behind me like a final verdict. 22 years of yielding, of existing only to let my sister shine, ended with that sound. In my grandfather's car, I pressed my forehead to the window as Detroit's streetlights streaked past. Tears fell silently down my cheeks. But this time, they weren't only pain. They carried something lighter, almost like freedom. My grandfather's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror. "You've been very brave, Emily," he said softly. "This should have happened long ago." His words wrapped around me like a balm on wounds I didn't know how to heal. For the first time, I felt like someone saw me, really saw me. Life in Grand Rapids was like stepping into a different world. My grandfather's home was spacious and quiet, filled not with tension but with warmth. Breakfasts in the sunny kitchen felt like rituals of peace. Evenings on the porch, with the Michigan sky melting into sunset, became a sanctuary where I could breathe. For the first time, I wasn't walking on trembling feet, measuring my every move to avoid triggering someone else's moods. I was allowed to exist without apology. When the acceptance letter from Michigan State's graduate program arrived, I ran to my grandfather with trembling hands. Tears blurred my vision as I handed him the envelope. "I got in," I whispered. He opened it, read it carefully, then looked at me with eyes shining brighter than I had ever seen. "You deserve this, Emily. I'll take care of the rest. Just fly as high as you can." I threw my arms around him, overwhelmed with gratitude. For once, I didn't have to fight for recognition. For once, my joy mattered to someone. At graduate school, I discovered what friendship truly meant. My classmates celebrated my successes without comparison, without dismissing them as expected. We pulled all-nighters together, shared stress, shared victories. With every moment, I felt myself stepping further out of Olivia's shadow. I laughed without fear of being ignored. I spoke without bracing for dismissal. For the first time, I felt the weight of invisibility begin to lift. But peace was never meant to last unchallenged. My phone buzzed relentlessly with messages from my parents, dripping with apologies that tasted hollow. "Emily, we know we were wrong. Please come home. Don't make your grandfather angry anymore." Another followed. I wasn't thinking clearly that day. Olivia is fragile. You understand? Right. Then my father called late at night, his voice raw. "You're our blood. Are you really going to abandon us?" At first, their words rattled me, stirring old instincts to yield, to forgive. But then I remembered standing alone at graduation, holding back tears as strangers clapped for me. I remembered the message that shattered me. "Please understand, Olivia had a panic attack. I knew they weren't missing me. They were missing the money. So I decided to test them." I typed one reply, steady and deliberate. "I'll consider coming back only if Olivia moves out on her own. She's 25, with a job and income. There's no reason for her to still depend on you. If you truly want me home, let her stand on her own." I hit send, knowing this condition was like a blade against their throats. I never intended to return. It was only a test to see if I had ever been their choice. Deep down, I already knew the answer. Days passed in an eerie silence after I sent that message, and each hour that ticked by without a response carried its own truth. They weren't choosing me. They never would. At first, the absence of their calls and texts felt like a fresh wound, but slowly it began to transform into something steadier. "Calmer." The quiet was an answer, and it was clearer than any words could have been. I sat with it, letting the realization sink deeper into my bones. I had stopped waiting, stopped hoping. For 22 years, I had begged for scraps of love. Now I no longer needed them. Then one afternoon, as I stepped out of class with my backpack heavy on my shoulders, golden light spilling across the campus, I froze. Beneath the branches of an old oak tree by the gate stood Olivia. Sunglasses covered half her face, but even in disguise, I recognized her instantly. My chest tightened. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, to avoid another confrontation. But before I could decide, her voice cut through the air, sharp and deliberate. "Emily, we need to talk." Students nearby turned their heads, some whispering. I swallowed hard, but instead of running, I walked toward her. I had sworn to myself I would never let her trample me again. She pulled off her glasses, her eyes cold and blazing. "You really are selfish. Mom and Dad are losing their minds because of you. Why would you set such a ridiculous condition? You knew they could never make me move out. Do you want to tear this family apart?" Her voice was loud, calculated, meant to draw attention. Whispers rose around us. For a moment, my body trembled like it always had. But then, something steadier took over. "If I recall," I said evenly, "you told me at my graduation that if you weren't happy, then I couldn't be either. So now I'm only returning the favor. I'm giving back what you sowed." Her face flushed red, lips pressed tight in fury. "You dare compare your little ceremony to my life? I'm the one under pressure, the one who needs protection. You've always pretended to be the victim." I smirked, though inside my chest my heart thundered. "You're right. I was the victim for 22 years, but not anymore. I won't let anyone, not even you, decide my worth again." Perhaps it was the calm in my tone that broke her. With a sudden scream, she lunged at me, hands outstretched to shove. Reflex kicked in. My arm shot forward, pushing her back with just enough force to send her stumbling. Gasps erupted around us. My classmates froze, some with phones raised, recording. For the first time, I hadn't yielded. For the first time, I had stood firm. Her eyes blazed, and she lunged again, this time reaching for my hair. But before she could reach me, several students intervened. "Hey, what's wrong with her?" one boy shouted, grabbing Olivia's arms. A girl pulled me aside, her grip steady on my shoulder. Olivia thrashed, screaming, "Traitor! You want to destroy this family? You'll regret this." Her words rang shrill, out of place, clashing with the stares of disapproval surrounding her. I stepped forward, meeting her eyes with a steadiness I had never felt before. "Olivia, you've taken enough from me, but this ends here. If you ever lay a hand on me again, I'll call the police. And this time, you'll be held accountable." My voice carried across the crowd, each word like steel. Olivia froze, her fury faltering under the weight of so many eyes watching her unravel. The obsession with her perfect image had always been her weapon, but here it was crumbling into ashes. I turned and walked away without another glance, my backpack heavy but my steps lighter than they had ever been. Behind me, Olivia's voice cracked, shrieking curses that only sounded pathetic against the silence of her ruined facade. My friends hurried after me, their voices gentle, checking if I was okay. I nodded, though inside I was still trembling. But beneath the storm in my chest burned something new. Victory, not over her, but over the part of myself that had always yielded, always stayed quiet. That confrontation wasn't just another fight. It was the turning point. For the first time, I had proven to myself that I was no longer a shadow in the Warren family. I was someone who could stand, fight, and draw a line that could never again be crossed. I thought Olivia's humiliation would silence her, or that at least my parents would try to smooth things over. But only a few days later, while I sat in the library preparing for an essay, my phone buzzed. A long message appeared in the family group chat. The first line struck me like a slap. "We've thought long and hard, and we choose Olivia. Don't ever come back." My breath caught, my eyes glued to the words. Then came the rest, colder still. "All the effort we put into raising you was wasted. You are ungrateful, selfish, and only bring division. We don't need a daughter like you anymore." I stared at the screen as the world seemed to tilt. But instead of breaking, something steadier rose inside me. The final answer had been given. They had never intended to choose me, and now they had said it out loud. I read the message again and again, each word slicing deeper yet leaving me strangely calm. For years I had begged, endured, and convinced myself that if I just held on, if I was strong enough, one day they would see me. But now, in black and white, they declared what I had always known. Olivia was the only daughter they wanted. Their rejection didn't shatter me the way I thought it would. Instead, it washed over me like cold water, clearing away the last traces of illusion. More messages flooded in, harsh and desperate. "You've torn this family apart. You're selfish, cruel, ungrateful. If your grandfather knew the real you, he'd be disappointed too." I stared at those words, and instead of crumbling, I laughed softly to myself. It was almost pathetic, the way they still tried to control me with guilt, with fear, the same weapons they had used all my life. But now, I finally saw them for what they were. Chains. Chains I no longer had to wear. With steady hands, I opened my phone settings, one by one. I blocked their numbers, their emails, the group chat that had always felt more like a battlefield than a family connection. Each click was final, each silence that followed a release. When the last button was pressed, my phone screen went dark and still. And in that silence, I felt a weight lift, as if 22 years of carrying their rejection had finally slipped off my shoulders. I sat there for a while, motionless in the quiet of the library. At first, I expected the tears to come, to drown me as they always had. But instead, a profound truth unfolded inside me. Being cut off by them wasn't a loss. It was freedom. I hadn't lost a family, because what they gave me had never been love. It had always been a facade built around Olivia's fragile image, propped up at the cost of my life, my worth. What I had blocked wasn't blood. It was the illusion I had clung to for far too long. I closed my laptop, slipped my books into my bag, and walked out into the golden light of the evening. The campus glowed. Laughter echoed from groups of friends, and the wind carried the scent of freshly cut grass. I drew in a long breath, feeling it fill me like a new beginning. For the first time, I wasn't weighed down by the hope that maybe, just maybe, tomorrow they would love me. I didn't need them anymore. That night, I sat with my grandfather on the porch, the Michigan sky painted in strokes of orange and violet. I told him everything: the confrontation at school, the vicious messages, the final rejection. He listened silently, his hand resting over mine, his eyes heavy with both sorrow and pride. When I finished, he spoke softly but firmly. "Emily, sometimes blood isn't where you'll find love. Sometimes the family you're born into isn't the one meant to hold you. But you had the courage to step away, and that's what matters. You're free now." His words pierced me with a warmth I had never known from my parents. I nodded, tears finally spilling, but these tears felt different. They weren't from desperation or longing. They were from recognition. For once, someone saw my pain, acknowledged my endurance, and called it bravery instead of selfishness. For once, I felt truly valuable, not because I achieved something, not because I carried the weight for everyone else, but simply because I was me. In the months that followed, my life began to take on colors I had never imagined. With my grandfather's unwavering support, I settled deeper into my graduate studies. Whenever stress pressed on me, I remembered his voice. "You don't have to prove yourself to anyone. You study because you want to, not to earn love." Those words became my anchor, steadying me through nights of anxiety and deadlines. I built friendships that felt real, people who celebrated me without comparing me to anyone else. I laughed more, breathed more, lived more. Meanwhile, news of my parents trickled back to me through acquaintances in Detroit. After my grandfather cut off his support, their small accounting firm collapsed within months. Contracts dried up, employees left, and bankruptcy forced them to sell the house that had once been a stage for Olivia's endless performances. Neighbors whispered, their reputation crumbling just as quickly as their finances. Olivia, stripped of her sheltered life, was finally forced into the real world. Her social media feeds grew sparse, her glamorous posts replaced with vague complaints and silence. It wasn't joy I felt at hearing this. It was fairness, long overdue. Life had finally caught up to them, forcing them to face the reality they had shielded her from and shoved onto me. And then, one spring morning, I found myself standing once again in a cap and gown, this time the deep green of Michigan State. As the music swelled and the announcer's voice rang out, "Emily Warren, Master of Arts in Psychology," I walked across the stage, but unlike 4 years before, my chest wasn't heavy. My eyes immediately found my grandfather in the front row, holding a bouquet of sunflowers, his pride radiating like sunlight. Beside him, my friends cheered, their voices raw and loud. My steps grew lighter with each clap, each smile, each cheer that surrounded me. When I accepted my degree and turned, I smiled at him. It wasn't a twisted smile of forced pride this time. It was pure, free, and full of joy. In that moment, I knew I had completed the journey, from a shadow overlooked in her own home to a woman who had reclaimed her worth. And to anyone listening to this story, I want to say this: sometimes, to find yourself, you must dare to let go of the ties that bind you to pain. Blood doesn't always mean family. Love, respect, and belonging come from those who see you, who value you, who walk beside you by choice. I lost one family, but I found a real one, beginning with my grandfather and with myself. Thank you for listening, and if this story touched you, I invite you to subscribe to Vengeance Within, where stories like mine remind us all of the strength it takes to rise from betrayal and claim our worth.